Alrighty, good evening, everyone. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info. Just jumping in here. Decided to do this video on the second channel. Under the circumstances, it's not going to be a trivia night video. This is certainly when it comes to more compelling news stories within the sport. I feel it's more appropriate to put them on this channel. Haven't done one of these in a little while, but I certainly was hoping that a story like this wouldn't be the one to lead off. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I feel a bit nervous doing a video on this subject. I think that, obviously there's a lot of strong feelings both ways. But I do think as a person that's in the media and talking about the sport and the responsibility that one has when you are going live with the story, with whatever information you have, I think that it was very important to actually make a statement on this. So bear with me if I am being very careful and trying to be careful with what I'm saying on this subject. As you all know, over the last weekend, there were a lot of events surrounding Bubba Wallace, and this within the larger context of what's been a very serious time, to say the very least, here in the United States, and NASCAR finding itself constantly, from one time to the next, being at the center stage of all this. Of course, being the first major sport to return from the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, of course, it's not separate from real world events. The events that have happened between the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, between the other, the ensuing riots that have torn apart so many cities across this country, and NASCAR trying to keep pace with all that and making sure that they stay in the conversation. Bubba Wallace, of course, being the lone African-American driver in the sport, has been sought out as, really somebody that's consulted to kind of lead us through this and try to get his side of the story and everything on that. And I think he has been an excellent ambassador for the sport in that sense. I can't play favorites in the media, but I would be lying if I said that I wasn't paying close attention to his career ever since he and Ryan Blaney were hugging in Victory Lane at Pocono, driving the two most iconic cars in the Cup Series. I think a lot of positive things have come about from Bubba's presence in the sport, and a lot of that even before the current political climate has turned into what it has been. I have, of course, been seeing at the same time with the rest of you everything else that's been happening along the way. I mean, of course, we've had Bubba Wallace running the Black Lives Matter car at Martinsville, the ensuing discussion and debate about the Confederate flag, it being ultimately banned from the racetrack, Racist Sorelli getting caught up in a lot of the debates from there, and then a lot more picking up from that. And then we all come into Talladega, where it's the first race that has had a significant amount of fans in the stands, but still nobody having any access to the garage area except a very limited group of people. I believe it's just the NASCAR officials, NASCAR team members, and then track medical staff just basically had access to the infield. It's been a very difficult time under these circumstances, but again, as these regulations have been loosened up a bit, certainly everybody looking forward to an exciting weekend of racing with Bubba Wallace and the other competitors in the sport. So we had now, of course, as I mentioned, and as again, a lot of you guys know, of course, we have had these races since May where we haven't had practice and in qualifying, and we haven't had any access really publicly to the garage area. So the access to the garage area has been very limited, like I said, and it's been a difficult situation with that. For media access, I know it's very difficult on their side because, I haven't done a lot of work in the press boxes at these races, but I usually avoid it because, quite honestly, if you're not able to go into the garage area, there's not really much point in my mind of actually being even at the track, because being in the press box, you get to see the whole track, which is nice, and you get to see all that, but you don't get to go down and interact with people so much. In the garage area, I mean, certainly what I do in the last place battles, that's really more relevant for what I do. And so before I go any further and in talking about the media side of this, I do understand that there were exceptional circumstances involved in this particular case where media members did not have access to the garage area. where they couldn't go down and do as much work and much face-to-face interaction with a lot of drivers and the teams because of the COVID regulations that were still in place. And that turned out to be, I believe, very critical in the way this chain of events played out. As you know, of course, late Sunday night, after the race had been postponed because of rain, so there was already hardly anybody in there, word broke that a noose was found in Bubba Wallace's garage stall. And the reaction was very much like the reaction we've seen to so many things lately, whether it be the Confederate flag debate, whether it be Black Lives Matter, whether it be Kyle Larson's situation, even back in April. So many other things we've seen in this circumstance. And we have seen a lot of anger and understandable anger. I mean, and I could sense the frustration about that in the sport here, because of course, you know, so much has been done through Bubba Wallace in particular, and trying to find a way to bridge the divide and have a sport that everybody can enjoy in a time where we don't even have baseball out there right now, guys. I mean, we are the only game in town. And so there's even more attention on the sport. And again, this is another factor, I think, that led to this being as serious a situation as it is. So again, you have a situation where media is not allowed to go into the garage area, where you have to say the very least, a very racially charged situation where everybody's aware of that and everybody's dealing with that, and pretending that that's not what's going on in the world. But you also have a time where, yeah, they have limited access to the garage area and everything going forward from that. So when a news story comes out that a noose was found at the only African American driver's garage stall in the garage area, of course, I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, this on top of everything else. And I don't blame people for being upset. What I do have an issue with is how carried away many in the media corps did at the very beginning of this. Without pictures of the noose, without firsthand accounts from the garage area, because nobody had access to the garage area, everybody had to work on conjecture and notes from from this person to that person and all that. And I'm not calling into question the people believing that there was a noose there. That's a whole other issue entirely. There was, apparently a crew member from Bubba Wallace's team, at least as far as we can tell from this, again, from that separation from the garage area, alerted NASCAR. They believed that they saw a noose in the garage stall. That was escalated. They brought 15 FBI agents to investigate this and treat this as seriously as they could. And of course, there was, that very emotional pre-race ceremony over at Talladega. Again, no issues, with any of that. Great showing of unity behind Bubba Wallace, and quite honestly, again, another driver that's been underrated in the sport, has had a lot of great runs before in that 43 car, and trying to work his way up there. But again, the problem, however, arises when the story was leaked with so little information, with not even a picture of what was believed to be the noose, with so little information. The due diligence was not done, I believe, by many in the media corps, and they ran with it. And I think that and then it escalated to a point where a certain member even suggested that perhaps the race even be canceled. This is the very difficult thing when it comes to media members. Now, I am not a person who has gone to journalism school. I will freely admit that. I have had to make mistakes along the way to understand what you can and cannot do in the media center. I have been very fortunate to work with people who have helped me along the way, and so that I can do the very best job that I can. But a media member, most importantly, their job, especially in sports media, is to make sure that the information that most of us do not have access to is able to be communicated accurately and timely to as many people as possible. That is your job. Otherwise, and I know it's difficult under the circumstance. I'm not really talking about people who weren't even at the track, but people who were at the track. Even though they weren't able to be in the garage area, that does not excuse a lack of due diligence and a eagerness to jump on board with the context of this situation. The context of what is going on, or what was going on at Talladega, is not proof of what was being expressed, even if it came from NASCAR themselves. Obviously there was a lot going on. You had people with Confederate flags outside the track that were protesting about that. You had the plane that was flying over with the banner. Of course there were a lot of things going on that would perhaps make a story like this seem like it actually happened. But there's a very important step that still needs to be in there, where you are fact gathering on this story, and then when you actually go to print and you start spreading it around, or even in some cases people actually going an even step further than that and actually saying, oh my gosh, we need to find this person, we need to hunt this person down, we need to do this and that. I'm not saying we need to be okay with racially charged situations, absolutely not. But a media member's job is to get the facts, to get the information. You have to get it right. And it's not just about your name out there, and that's important enough. I mean, if you know, look, for me, like in my little corner of this, if I get something wrong about like which team gets the black flag for improper fueling or something like that, and I get that wrong, I'm going to try to get that correction as soon as I can. And I try to minimize those instances as much as I can. But that is so much more important when it is a racially charged situation. If you are going to run with a story that is about a driver being threatened, his life being threatened, and you are implicating the higher up officials of the sport, the NASCAR officials, the paramedics, the team members, if you are going to implicate those people, you better be right. You better be right. And it is inexcusable to run with this the way that it was run with. I believe it was a very sloppy job by a number of media members. And the worst case of those were ones that were egging people on social media and talking about how they were so angry, they were shaking and everything like that. Okay, you can be angry. You can absolutely be that way. But we consult media to get us the facts, to get us the story. They are not supposed to be that swayed by their bias in all this. And again, some of us may feel more strongly about things like this than others, and that's a-okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to get a diverse group of people who have different backgrounds, because then you get different sides of different stories. But you have to have the story be important, and you have to make sure that the story is accurately reported. The reason for this is that, again, you hear about all this stuff, people trying to compare this to Jussie Smollett. First of all, I will say, I don't think that's fair to Bubba Wallace. I don't believe that it's fair to attach that to him. The different circumstances here. But the problem is, you have to consider the way that this event is going to be portrayed and the way that this is going to be played. It's a bridge too far, and it's unfortunate because a lot of good was done by that pre-race ceremony. A lot of unity was shown and so much positive from that. And it isn't right and it isn't fair that this was turned around. If that was just done organically, just because they just decided to spontaneously celebrate Bubba Wallace and all he's done under all this, that probably would be fine. And then this would just be something completely separate. But it's not fair to actual victims of racial violence. It is not fair to actual victims of hate crimes to run with the story when you do not have all the information, because what happens then is that the next story that comes out, people aren't going to treat it seriously. And so much more harm is done from that than from some person that may be perceived as racist or somebody that's just dismissing it. It does just as much harm, if not more, to have a story be completely read wrong in this case. It's completely inexcusable. And this cavalier attitude by some in the media, where they are going to just say, oh, well, okay, I guess there was no problem. I guess it's fine. You know, no harm, no foul. No. Think about if this report did not come through today. If this report did not come through today, every single person that was in that garage area, whether they were, somebody driving the ambulance, a NASCAR official, or a crew member, all the way up to team owners and everybody else that was in there, they would have all had the light shown on their face with a threat of a federal charge. And okay, people would say, oh, well, if somebody didn't do it, then they have nothing to worry about. You need to understand that in the social media era, perception can become reality. You only have to look at last weekend for proof of that. And that could have, we don't know if this went any further. Suppose somebody else was put forward in like a Richard Jewell situation, where it's somebody that they saw was around there, and everybody just dog piles on that person. This person was the guy that did it, and then you have a whole other thing. And people will say, "Oh, well, I guess some person's life wasn't ruined from it." It could have been. It could have been, and that's a very dangerous thing. And I know I like to keep things light and everything on here, but this is very serious, and it is, quite frankly, professionally embarrassing as a NASCAR media member to see so many get carried away with them. It's not fair. It's not fair to those who are working at the track. It's not fair to Bubba Wallace. It's not fair to other people who are trying to make a name in their sport. It's shameful, and it shouldn't have happened. And yes, there were mitigating factors. Yes, they didn't have access to the garage area. Yes, they weren't able to get pictures of the noose and other information there, but they should have requested that information. They were in position that they should have collected that information, and they should have done their job. And yes, NASCAR came down on it, and you say, okay, well, NASCAR comes down with something, and okay, yeah, if they have a story, then you print it. Okay, there's that. But there has to be that moment in there where you think about it and say, okay, well, wait a minute. If somebody put a noose out there and there's no fans out there and there's no media out there, this would mean that somebody within NASCAR in the higher levels was somehow involved in this. And that moment, I believe, was skipped in many of these cases. I don't know for sure. And I'm not saying all media members at all. There were some that asked questions about this and did their work on this. But there were others that I feel jumped the gun on this. And it's disappointing. It's disappointing. And it's something that I think all NASCAR media members, all media members in general, need to take as a cautionary tale. This could have been even more serious than it is. At best, this will be a situation where we could say, okay, well, look, NASCAR was on it. They know, they're showing how seriously they're taking all this in this time period, that it's no tolerance, zero tolerance on this, and maybe something positive can still come from this. But if something else positive is going to come from this, I hope it is that media members are a little bit more careful when they come to a story and they understand the magnitude of a serious story like this and the damage that can be done from not getting it right. And again, I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to do all that, because quite honestly, we need to all work together on this. We need to all be better. We need to be the change that we want to see in the world. And I don't like going down this road on all this, because there's a lot of people that were involved in this that I respect a lot professionally, quite honestly. And I have seen a lot of them take steps on this and be involved in this in ways that I just don't understand. And I hopefully in time that we do learn from this and that we take a step in the right direction on this, because this isn't right. This can't keep happening. This should also not be tolerated. And no, you can't just and I know it's embarrassing. I mean, again, when I make a little mistake or something like that, it embarrasses me, and I got to make sure I work hard so that I am putting out the right information out there. But when it comes to a story like this, you have to be right on all points. You have to be. It's so much bigger than just NASCAR. It is towards the justice of the interest of racial equality, the interest of all this. It is undermined when those of us who have the ability to reach a lot of people and have the interest in this, when we do not do our due diligence, we do so much harm. And you don't have to have a journalism degree to understand that. And that I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you again for tuning in. If you have any other thoughts on this, I'd be interested to see it. Go ahead and jump on the comments down there. I hope you all are being safe out there. I hope we all come out the better for this on the other end. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll have some more information coming up. Thank you.